Hello and welcome to another episode of my podcast. I am delighted and thrilled to have you here today. On this particular episode, we're going to explore, again, the fascinating word of leadership practice, what leadership means, what works, what doesn't work, and how we can continually grow in our leadership. I've always said on this podcast that leadership is a practice, and we can learn from the actions, the successes, and the mistakes of individuals, of authority figures. Leadership is not a title, it's not by authority, but as we look at the actions of those in positions of authority, we can learn from them. We can learn valuable lessons to apply in our own leadership practice. And so in today's episode, we're going to be looking at what I've titled The Price of Broken Trust, Why Public Figures Keep Falling. Quite interesting, yeah. And in this episode, this episode is on the backdrop of some recent political news in the United Kingdom. All right, there was a recent big resignation. Listen, authority is a powerful thing. It allows political figures to guide, to make decisions, to mobilize people towards collective goals. But you see, in public life, authority is never a personal right. It's a trust. It's something learned. It's been given, learned by figures, learned to figures by the people, to authority figures by the people that they serve. And when that trust is broken, even the highest office can't protect such individuals from accountability. And we see this vividly recently in the UK politics. The former Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, resignation as Housing Secretary and also Deputy Prime Minister, following scrutiny of her tax arrangements, where she was found to have paid less stamp duties of £40,000 for a property she recently acquired, illustrates how fragile authority can be when public confidence collapses. And she's not the first. I mean, earlier this year or a few weeks ago, Rushanara Ali, then the Homelessness Minister or Secretary, resigned after it was revealed she evicted tenants from her flat only to increase their rent by £700 a month, or increase the rent by £700 a month. Now, both examples reminds us that authority is a public trust. And when public figures forget this, the cost can be steep. Now, from these stories, I want to explain a few concepts about authority and leadership. And these stories reminds us of lessons about leadership. And I want to highlight a few. And the first is, authority is borrowed, not owned. Yes, authority is borrowed, not owned. Public officials don't own authority. They hold it on loan, in trust, on behalf of the citizens. Now, Angela Rayner's tax case and Ali's housing matter show that even private financial choices can test whether authority figures honor that borrowed trust. The message is clear. Authority can be quickly revoked by those who entrusted it if the public perceives self-interest over service. And the office alone cannot protect legitimacy. Authority must be continuously earned, never assumed. And my second point is on the fragility of trust and credibility. Trust is fragile. It takes years to build and only seconds to shatter. Angela Rayner's resignation is a sharp reminder of that truth. Here's a woman who rose from a working class background, leaving school at the age of 16, training as a care worker, fighting her way through the labor movement. She became a crusader for those who often felt voiceless. People in council flats, those who lived in council flats in the US, they'll call them the projects. Single parents, low-income families trying to survive. For many, Angela Rayner wasn't just another politician, she was their story. A proof that someone from their word could rise to the highest levels of government. But here's the issue with credibility. It's not anchored in titles or offices. It's anchored in consistency. The moment questions surfaced about her tax issues, it wasn't seen as a technical detail. It was seen as a betrayal of trust and fairness. The very values she built her credibility on. And in my opinion, that's why the fall, the damage was quick, was so swift. One breach of perceived fairness unraveled years of hard-won trust. Now, also compare this with Rushanara Ali. Now, as homelessness minister, she was tasked with shaping housing policy, which includes landlord and tenant issues, as expected. But yet, in her private dealings, she evicted tenants from her flats, only to raise rent by £700 a month. So that was the reason why they were evicted. Well, I mean, you will say perfectly legal. She's entitled to do it. Perhaps. But politically devastating, because to the public, it screamed hypocrisy to the people who entrusted her with authority. Both Rayner and Ali reminds us credibility isn't about what's legal. It's about what feels legitimate. It's about whether the story you tell in public matches the life you live in private. And once people sense a gap between your values and your actions, credibility collapses. And when credibility collapses, you have to resign. Resignation follows. Now, here's a lesson to learn. Credibility is impermanent. It's not something you win and once and then hold forever. It's fragile. It's conditional. And it demands constant alignment between words, values, and actions. Because in the end, authority is a public trust. And once the trust is gone, so is the authority. My third point is transparency is the currency of trust. All right? Transparency is the currency of trust. In public life, transparency is everything. Authority rests on citizens believing their leaders are open, honest, and accountable. Now, Angela Rayner's lack of clarity on her tax arrangements weakened that bond. Similarly, Ali's renter practices, while technically a private matter, looked hypocritical for someone responsible for homelessness policies. In both cases, what was missing wasn't legality, but transparency. Power doesn't flow just from the office itself. In fact, primarily, power doesn't flow from the office. It flows from the consent and trust of the people who gave it to you. And once that trust is shaken, authority crumbles. Food for thought. My fourth point is ethical conduct outweighs legal loopholes. Authority is not just about staying inside the lines of the law. It's about legitimacy. Leaders can defend themselves with technicalities, but if the public feels misled or exploited, credibility erodes. Ali may not have broken the law when she raised rents after evictions. Rayner may argue that her tax arrangements complied with regulations, but authority is judged not by legal defenses, but by public perception of fairness. Legitimacy is ethical, not just legal. And my fifth point is stewardship requires sacrifice, not privilege. All right? Stewardship requires sacrifice, not privilege. Holding authority means carrying heavier burdens, not enjoying lighter ones. True leadership involves higher standards of scrutiny and at times personal sacrifice. Public leaders cannot claim the privileges of office without embracing its responsibilities. And so the former Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, and also Housing Minister, Angela Rayner, and also the former homelessness minister Ali both misjudged this balance, appearing to benefit personally in ways that clashed with their public duties. Authority is stewardship, not entitlement. Both cases highlight the same principle. Public authority is a form of stewardship. It doesn't grant entitlement, it demands sacrifice. Citizens expect those they empower not to rise above the burdens of ordinary life, but to carry those burdens more heavily, more transparently, and more fairly. Authority is always on loan, and the condition of that loan is clear: sacrifice, not privilege. My closing thoughts on this podcast and on this issue. Now, so what does all this mean for us? How does it affect you and I? Most of us will never be deputy prime minister or a housing minister or homelessness minister. But every one of us carries some kind of authority in our workplaces, in our families, in our communities, in our organizations. People look to us. They trust us. And the same principle applies. Trust and credibility are fragile. It's not about the position we hold, not about the position you hold, but the consistency we live by. When our words and our actions line up, trust grows. When they don't, trust evaporates. So the challenge isn't just for politicians, it's for all of us. How do we steward the authority we've been given at work, at home, in our neighborhoods, in our organizations, our religious organizations, in a way that builds trust instead of breaking it? Because authority is always a public trust. And whether you are running a nation or raising a family, the same truth holds. Trust is hard to build and heartbreakingly easy to lose.